let's get rolling. So, what we're going to cover today is making your AI smarter, more accurate for real projects, using prototypes, doing an end-to-end prototyping flow. And what we're really going to be talking about is using different sources of context in order to pull in data, in order to pull in KPIs for the business, for the way that you want those interactive flows to go. We're going to be able to leverage screenshots if anything's broken, or if you want to refine certain aspects of that. And then we'll also connect MCP servers. I'm planning on using Linear today, if anyone uses that for kind of project or ticket management. But connect that to third-party services to bring in external data as well. So if any of that is interesting, or if y'all have ideas as we're going through this that you'd like to call out or see, I am all ears. This is a diagram that I usually like to start on, and I love to draw all over this one. So if you allow me, I'm going to grab my annotation tool and start to kind of doodle over this diagram. With what we're talking about today, we're actually not going to be highly focused on setting up initial target code bases or reference code bases. Normally, when using Fusion, we're going to connect to, maybe an existing application, something like that. But what we're really going to be focused on today, for the sake of that prototype, is a new repo that we're going to be creating. And the context we're going to use, let me even scroll over on my screen a little bit, is actually a lot of what's down here, right? So we're going to be using PDFs, we're going to be using screenshots, we're going to be using an MCP server. So if you haven't used any of those before, really eager to hear your questions and thoughts around that. And that's what we're going to use to guide the creation of, ultimately, and there we go, that's a big arrow, that new repo housing the prototype that we can share with our coworkers. I'm hoping to drop into the chat for you all to interact with towards the end of this call. Other things I want to say here, and actually, with that being said, we will have that preview URL, so I'm going to share that with you all. I do have a starter template, and I want to explain what a starter template is. Let me even just move forward one slide, and we can keep rolling in that way before we get into things. Get out of there. Oh, there's my annotation tool. Cool. So actually, okay, I guess I put this ahead of this, talking through some of that context again, right? So what are we doing? The starter template is going to give us the ability to connect to a design system. And quick answer in the chat, yes, you will receive the recording with all of these thoughts and ramblings, and you'll receive resources afterwards so that if you all want to follow along on the same prototype flow that I did, you can do so. Going on this prototyping journey, we're going to initially connect that design system to a PRD that I created using Claude. And I'll show you all what I'm doing for the PRD. I'm going to drop it into Fusion. That's going to kickstart what we do for our initial step. Our second step is that we're going to add in some screenshots. We're going to refine and iterate. We're going to click everything we can in our prototype that we're creating to see if anything was broken or if there's just anything that we want to, continue to iterate on. Last thing that we're going to do here is pull in some imaginary tickets I created in Linear to request certain modifications or updates to that prototype we're creating. So I've got two in mind already. I do have a couple of extra prompts and kind of bonus things I'd like to throw in depending on the way that this prototype creation goes. But we'll play a lot of that by ear and see what we want to refine. And this is why for this one, I'd really love if folks have things they want to see, feel free to drop them into the chat. If you have ideas for refinements or updates, the prototyping flow is meant to be a little bit wild and it's meant to be, kind of fun to see what we can create and experiment with here. So please feel free to throw those into the chat and I'll try to take some of those into consideration. A lot of people using Otter AI. Yes, we're going to have many notes after this meeting. Now, I threw out this a second ago as a phrase, the idea of the starter template. I do quickly want to cover that I've got a starter template created, and this is also something that's going to be in the follow-up resources for this webinar. What I've done is taken an Untitled UI, which is an open source design system, and I've taken one of their starter kits, which basically is a React V app. Very basic. You're going to see the app as it loads when I start to prompt for that initial application I'm building. It has a subset of the React UI components in it. I did also connect the Untitled UI React component library. And so we can talk through the configuration of that if anyone's interested. Just a small startup step that I did in order to make sure the prototype is actually using the design system I want it to use, which in this case is Untitled UI. In case I haven't said that word enough, Untitled UI. And then other than that, I just want to cover off, I'd said a few times, this is probably not going to be perfection on first sweep. Like we're going to iterate, we're going to refine, we're going to work on a lot of things here. So just not a mindset adjustment, but think about the fact that we are going to not work towards perfection with this prototype and our experimentation, more towards ideation. Um, One quick answer on a question there. How about Angular? So for Angular, I believe I'll have to double check if Untitled UI has that as one of their component libraries, but you can do this with any sort of design framework within the web frameworks that we support. So Vue, Svelte, Angular. Have I covered React already? React. You can do this for all those with the starter templates. And one last note of caution, if anyone likes Jurassic Park, hold on to your butts. Let's get into some prototyping. And this was just my really snappy intro to the actual demo. So with any or no further ado, let me go ahead and shift screens here. And I'm going to bring us into the Fusion interface. There we go. There we go. And I'm going to drop in our very first prompt. We're going to have quite a bit of time after this prompt starts loading because we're going to ask it to, let me pull up this file, take in my PRD, and we're going to ask it to build an application from the requirements in the attached PDF. And you'll notice here, this is where I have that starter template specified. There are some that come out of the box with Builder, but these are just framework specific, right? So it's not like Angular plus V is going to have my custom design system attached. But you can take that and you can attach your design system. For the sake of this one, I'm going to leave that right there and I'm going to send this off. And so we'll be taken into a new project. And this is where we can start to have this loading in the background. And I'll request if folks have questions, please feel free to put those into the question section. That'll make it a little bit easier for us to answer those. And yes, Connor, I think we already answered that, but the recording will be made available to everyone who attended this afterwards, and potentially even those who didn't if they signed up for the webinar. And I'll also make sure that everyone gets the follow-up resources. So that'll include the repos I used for the starter template, as well as anything you need to know to set that up on your own. Now, let me go ahead and keep those up here. Let's make sure this is still loading. Okay, awesome. So we're getting started now in Fusion. You've got my prompt right there. You'll see my very basic starter app that's right on the right-hand section, this Untitled UI starter kit. This is going to get entirely replaced by what Fusion is going to create for us for this prototype. And I do want to expand this before I show you that PRD that I created, but let's just see how Fusion's thinking about what I've asked it to do, right? So I love to expand these thinking icons, especially when I'm doing kind of free form experimentation. We can see that Fusion understands, okay, what I'm using. It can see my component library, the framework. It knows what design system I'm using. And it's got a little bit of an understanding about, the project itself. Because this is such a basic starter app, there's not a ton in there. It's got this basic home screen and some routing. And then we've got the four-step mortgage application onboarding flow. So the PRD that I'm about to show you all, that I just used Claude to help me create, it has a couple different sections I'm asking Builder to build out. And that's what we should be seeing here, along with any of those key features I requested in the PDF. So Fusion's interpretation of all this is that it's going to create a to-do list to implement all that functionality, build that onboarding flow, and then set up that routing so we can see it here. So I'll kind of keep an eye on the left-hand side, but I would love to shift into just quickly showing you all what I used to even drop in this context. So this is the PDF that I dropped in, and this is what I asked Claude to help me create. I'm pretty sure you can use ChatGPT anything to help do this, or if you're a better product designer or manager than I am, you probably have a bunch of different versions of this that you could use. So for mine, I just said, hey, let's create a simple four-step onboarding flow. We want some different sections as a part of that mortgage onboarding. So standard here, like let's get started. Tell me about the loan with all the loan details, personal information, the about you section, and then the submission portion. I did name some key features that I want to see. So, having the progress bar, having the ability to save and continue later, optimizing for mobile, and then even put in a couple of success metrics here. It's always kind of fun to me to see how the LLMs think about the success metrics because this is more of what I'm trying to accomplish, right? As like a business unit, as a PM, as a designer, but we'll see how Fusion takes that into consideration. Scroll back up here. I'm going to keep an eye on this to make sure that all is good on that side. And let me take a quick look at our questions. So if people have questions, this is going to be a really good point to ask them because we are going to have some time while that like multi-step flow gets built out. I'm going to start with, okay, I really need to see how to build out with an LLM. That's where I'm stuck right now. Catherine, if you want to elaborate on that one, even in your question, I'm not sure if this is the part you're talking about, like how to build out. If so, we're going to do the end-to-end flow. But if you do have a specific question about like how to build out that PDF or how to build out, a starter template using an LLM, feel free to drop it in there. For how we connected the design system to Builder, I used a starter template. And so that's where the starter template tells Builder the type of application and the framework I want to build in. But you'll notice my starter template, let me even just circle this on the screen. This is what my starter template is. So it's basically a V application with my design system installed within it. So that can be as an NPM package, or that can be just a set of components. It's kind of the one setup step that would require engineering if someone wants to get started using the prototyping here. And hopefully that's a little bit clearer. We will send over more resources on the design system setup following this, and that's starter templates in case I haven't said that one enough. So I don't have a builder rule defined to point to the design system repo. That's all through that starter template setup. And let's see, where can you find Fusion in the Builder IO dashboard? So for anyone who hasn't used Fusion, you'll go to the project section of your Fusion space. And so Antonio, if you need a link to that, I might even be able to drop that into our chat, or perhaps someone else can as well. Let's see. I notice there's a lot of questions in chat. If folks can put them into the Q&A, it's a little bit easier just because we can kind of see, more than just the comments there. So if folks can try to put their questions into the Q&A, that would be great. I will try to go through here and answer some of these while we see this loading in the background. So let's see. I've used Builder before in Figma. So for anyone who hasn't used Fusion, and maybe to Antonio's point, this is a separate URL, and I will actually just drop this into our chat. There is going to be a QR code afterwards where folks will be able to download that, but let me just grab this for you. Perfect. Let me keep this running. And I will say in the background of my window while this is loading, you're going to see that a lot of folks, or sorry, a lot of the screens might be regenerating, they might be loading. It's totally normal because we're restarting the dev server, Fusion's testing different functionality. So if it looks broken right now, if we see errors from time to time, it's kind of just a part of that normal prototyping development process. And let's see, can we format the output for mobile apps only? Not today. We can focus on mobile responsiveness using web frameworks. So that's one of those 4 or 5 that I listed earlier, like Vue, Svelte, Angular, React. But we don't have Swift, Kotlin, or Swift, Kotlin, what's another big one? Flutter, React Native for this web browser view today. That is something that, we're working towards. So stay tuned there. Let's see, can we use a design system or component library created in Figma as a starter template? So you do need the connection in code to use as a starter template. So that is a prereq in order to use that as a starter template. You can use Figma and Fusion to build out that component library and then use that. But you will need some sort of code base so that it can use as context each time as the starter template. Oh, okay. And I really like someone's question here. Could flowcharts or user journeys be a good addition to the PDF? Totally. That would be an awesome addition to the PDF. And in total honesty, I tried to keep the PDF minimal because it takes a decent amount of time if we're going to put in a lot of pages of context. But I have worked with folks who've dropped in like 15, 20-page documents as their PDF with user journeys, with requirements for the interactivity they're expecting from section to section. So you can absolutely get much, much deeper there, combine the flowcharts, use that sort of information in order to guide the LLM. And then Marcel's question, I do want to answer this, and hopefully you're going to see this as we're going through. There will be some drifts and breaks, and there will be some behavior that we need to fix and refine, just the same way we would as if we were developing this locally. And so as we're building this application, there might be some breaks here. There might be some points where we do need to refine what we're seeing, or we might need to have Fusion fix itself. And so that is part of kind of the more wild or the rogue part of the prototyping, where We don't have the full context of a production application necessarily guiding, hey, here's how all these patterns go, or here's exactly how the input for all these text field works, or the interactivity. But hopefully, you're going to see by the end of this that we can take that experimentation and turn it into something that does work, even if we do want to iterate on small parts to continue onwards. And let's see. Oh, let me mark a few of these as answer because I hopefully can get to these. Let's see. All right, looks like it's taken a few images here. And actually, for folks, I might show one thing really quickly while this is still wrapping up. When it's checking out how that's looking. A few people had questions about, what was the starter template? I didn't show this necessarily, but this is actually the starter repo. I'm just going to drop this into the chat. And this is the starter design system that I was using for mine. And so these will be follow-up resources that we'll make available to anyone who's on the email chain for the webinar. But if you want to use these, if you want to try what I'm doing, I'm happy to go through that further. Yes, please working. Every once in a while, if anyone's doing kind of a dense prototype using Fusion, you might see that it's like, hey, are you sure you want to keep going? You've been doing this for a while. I always just tell yes for something like this. I should probably put in a custom instruction that says like, keep going until I tell you not to, but that's where we are for this one. Awesome. And let's see where we're at. Okay, so allegedly, we have got a four-step mortgage application using all these different points that we had in our PRD. So you all can help keep me honest. But let's start going through what we're doing for the mortgage application. And I'll just do a quick scroll down here, but you'll see that Fusion's trying to build out of this simple landing page for the mortgage app. So let's say, okay, let's start the application. Cool. Okay, so this is probably step one of my PRD. If you remember, I said, hey, we need to collect login and sign up info. So let's do some sample info here. Let's create a test password. Let's reconfirm that test password. Oh, nice. And we have validation already. Five. What's a fake number? We'll pretend like that's good. I think I could add that like I need terms and conditions or something to be referenced right here. So something I might do is actually take a photo of this. So that's going to be one screenshot that we can use to keep refining, but I'm just going to keep testing this before I ask Fusion to do anything else there. Okay, cool. And so this is the loan details section. So in here, let's just follow the prereqs. Okay, we got a little bit of an error here, and I'm just going to have it fix it on its own. So I'm just going to say, hey, fix this runtime error. And this is really how I like to go through that prototyping, right? It's like, let me make sure that I can click on everything, break anything that I can, and just have Fusion put in whatever I need to add the validation, to, ensure that this is working the way that maybe I would want my users or you all at the end of this call to interact with this application I'm building. One thing I haven't tested, and I do kind of like to see is just, was it made responsive? Because we did tell Fusion that was something that mattered to us, was that we were going to be able to go throughout these different breakpoints. Now I will take a quick look. Okay, nothing in the chat. Any more questions? Whoops. I think I accidentally spotlighted something. Let's look at Q&A. Ooh, that's a good question, Tony. So I'm going to answer this one while we're waiting on that text field update to come in. So yeah, given that I'm building mocks directly from a PRD in Builder, is there a supported workflow for importing them back into Figma if we need to make design adjustments? So there is a supported workflow here, but I wouldn't think of it as going from Figma to Builder, Builder to Figma. I would always think of it as one way from Figma. And you can use the Builder Figma plugin. Oh, and I should have pulled up. I know that this design system has a Figma file with components. I'll try to find a good way to show this maybe towards the end of the call, or I can recommend one of our other webinars where we do this, but you can select a component where maybe there's been updates made in Figma, and then you can use design mode. I'll just show this quickly. Once this starts loading, let's see if it stopped loading. It hasn't yet. You can just use design mode to select that same component or frame in Builder and say apply the updates. And so that'll keep pulling in, anything that you need to do in order to make those design adjustments. I guess the one thing I'd say in relation to your question is that you can theoretically put stuff that you're designing and building in Builder back into Figma if that's where you need to be your source of truth, but it will come over as detached, not attached to the component library. And I could even just do that by selecting this and then pasting it into the Builder plugin. You'll see an import tab where you can use the paste whatever you're building in Builder Fusion back into Figma. So it may have been a little bit of a complex answer to what you were saying, kind of answered that in two different ways, but I hope that's a little bit helpful. And we do have another webinar that goes more into those Figma flows with Builder. Let's see, I think we're almost done on this text field wrap up. It looks like it's just checking those. Let me just see if I can, okay, mess with those yet. Okay, it's still working on capturing those. Let me see, I might even cheat and show you all what I'm going to be using for our MCP server while we're waiting on this text field portion to get solved right here. And so for the next portion of our call, what I want to look at is actually using a PRD in order, or sorry, PRD, a ticket in linear to set up theming or potentially even to create a landing page variation. And so while we're waiting on that refinement there, I'm actually going to say create a landing page variation for my mortgage application. And let's say it should optimize uh, the landing page to provide users with an, yeah, let's actually just say this. Perfect. Yeah, so I'm going to probably use this one, BUI2316, as one of our next prompts, is using this external ticket in order to drive context for what we want Fusion to do. Now, let's see, hopefully this should be fixed. Is this working now? Let me go back. Let me just try this again. So we got test, that's working as expected. Let's check out our flow. Alexis is going to hopefully remember her password. And let's try that next step right there. Okay, so it looks like that's working, but our down payment ones are not. So let me take two more screenshots here. So this is where we start to get into using the screenshots for refinement. So what I'm going to do is take two screenshots. I want to just highlight that those are not working. And I'm going to drop that into Fusion right now once those save for me. So we've got these two. You'll see we drop those into the Fusion context and say, let's just say the text fields for loan amount and down payment are not allowing me to enter numbers. Trying to be specific and tactical enough, but we don't need to go wild on that, right? Like we don't need to say exactly what we entered or how that's not working. So if anyone's still kind of learning how to prompt engineer, how to work with these, I'm by no means an expert, but certainly getting used to iterating and refining a lot of different apps in that manner. Yeah, that's a good call, Andrew. It's pretty similar. Trying to use the HTML to Figma and vice versa. Builder essentially will take that same flow of converting JSON into Figma structured JSON. I found that it looks fairly similar. It's the detached part that can sometimes be an issue unless you can work with that on your side as a design team. Let me take another look at our questions here. Oh, that's a good question, Tom. Do I feel that having a PDR or PDF is better than having a detailed prompt? The prompt can do the same as outlined in the PDF, right? The one reason that I sometimes like having the PDR structured as a PDF is just that it can get unwieldy depending on how detailed we're getting in our prompt. So I sometimes prefer to work in that way, just so I can outline the sections and Fusion or any LLM really for that matter can kind of use the context of the section headers to delineate what I care about and what sections should do, this or that. But to your point, a prompt is going to give the same kind of context. And at the end of the day, we're just trying to get that context to the LLM in a way that it can understand and work from. So I'd say I defer to testing as a number one, but if it's pretty dense, long, PRD, a PDF or something structured might be a bit easier for the LM to consume, unless you're really good at putting that into words just in the prompt box and you're okay with that. And let's see. Think we've got a fix in there, and so we'll check in a second once it does its final screenshot rounds. You'll see a lot of what we're seeing on the left-hand side is after a fix is put in, then what Fusion often will do, will take a screenshot, attempt to test it itself, attempt to validate that's worked as expected. So let's do this final screenshot, and then we'll try it ourselves. One thing too I do want to call out, This is kind of a smaller one that I didn't notice beforehand, but we do actually have our progress bar that's calling out as we get started, as we progress throughout. So we're at the 50% point through this. So align to one of those, I think it was my KPIs. If I go back to my PRD, we should be able to see that I said, hey, these are the things I care about. And I incorporated those sometimes in even subtler ways than I anticipated. I'm going to start to fill this out. Let's just see if these other ones are working as expected. We'll do New York, even though I think San Francisco is the one on there. Let's keep some of those. And then we'll just keep working through this one. Alrighty. And so let's see if the currency inputs are now working. I will say throughout all my testing, there's certain things you find depending on the application or depending on what you're working from, where sometimes you find out that prompting a little bit better can make it happen more easily, or that, the way you describe it, even in your PRD, can help say, hey, this is what I'm expecting. And it's funny, all my fancy input fields still not working as expected. Sometimes I like to go nuclear on this and say, fix it now, but let's see. Fix this, finally. Yeah. Not mean to the AI, just, please put out a nuclear fix for this. Take a look at our Q&A while we wait for that one to come through. You include Figma plugin Smart Export in the PRD document. Oh, interesting. I have not tried that. I probably wouldn't. I would keep the Figma plugin Smart Export going into the prompt box right here. So if I circle that, like this is where I would put all the context that we're expecting, whether that's files, screenshots, Figma exports. I think the one thing about putting it into a PDF or PRD, and this is interesting, screenshots I think are fine to keep in a PRD if that's the way your organization works. But I might use the Figma files afterwards to refine and iterate. That's actually one I'd probably play with a bit to see what turns out better. Yeah, I'm trying to think through that one out loud. So that's one, yeah, long and short on that one. I would experiment with that. I would probably still continue to put the Figma Smart Export into the context box, but I think try PRDs with screenshots and see how far you get. Now, another question right here. If you use a generic UI kit to do the initial generation, how would you change the design system? Would you need to create a new file or build on the current project? Ooh. So for that, you could tell Fusion what you wanted to do to build on the current project. You could tell it that you want to change the design system components. And if you could point to something public while you're putting in these prompts, I don't see any reason why you couldn't do that, right? Even if you're using that generic UI kit in the beginning. If you want to use a proprietary system, that's where I'd say having it set up originally might be easier, just because it's not going to be able to access anything private when you're just putting it into the prompts here. Hopefully that's helpful. And let's see. And how will Fusion handle it if we need to use third-party libraries? Hopefully, this is something I'm going to answer right after we kind of go through this flow, get things working by showing you using that third-party linear application. If you're talking about a different kind of library, feel free to drop that into your question or drop that into a separate one, like if you've got something in mind. But for third-party platforms, that's something that with MCP servers we can typically integrate. All right. So allegedly, we're taking our screenshot again. Let's see if we finally nailed down the behavior for those currency input fields that were giving us trouble beforehand. So I'm just going to try to enter these beforehand. Let's see. Oh, it's still doing that. Sorry, I was looking at the one up ahead. Yes, we're still getting some fixes out on that. Okay, awesome. So now let's go ahead and fix that for me. And I can show folks the code for this afterwards too, if anyone wants to see. But one thing I'll say is that we should see that there's that similar look and feel because it is using that design system that I told it to use from the starter template. I can tell it to, point in the Q&A to use something else if I want to. But for the sake of my prototype, I do want it to keep that same look and feel that my theoretical organization's using. Sweet. And now it's fixing step 3 for me. Let's see if step 2 is working for me now. I'll give it one more second. And then we'll keep playing with this. And let me see if I'm trying to keep an eye on the Q&A. Gonna mark a few as done that I think we've talked about already. And let's see if those currency fields are working for us. Brief sip of coffee for anyone else who needs a quick prototyping coffee break. I will tell a quick story here. I was at an offsite the other week and, we were talking about, okay, like it takes 20, 30 minutes sometimes to go through prototyping flow, like things do break, we do have to iterate. It is kind of wild sometimes to think about how long this took, not even, a couple of years ago when we were building ourselves. So, it's certainly valid that this can take, a little longer than maybe first sweep being perfect. But I think it is always crazy just how I would have been doing this 5 or 10 years ago. So thank you, world. Thank you. Modernity. That's a word that I'm still not caffeinated enough for. Let's see. Okay. If we should now have the currency fields fixed. Cool. So I'm just going to look at the summary really quick, just format values, and let's see if this is working as we hope for. Oh, and there we go. So maybe now I'm crossing my fingers. This was the runtime error that we secretly had happening the whole time. And truly, the way that debugging happens in essence for something like this. You just test to make sure all this is still working for us. And then I think with any luck should be the last bug we typically need to handle on this one. And we'll get into more of that linear side and creating test variations. I will check, Ollie, to your question in the chat. I will check what the QR code gets, folks. I can't remember if there's some sort of trial basis, and this is something that our marketing team typically works through. So keep an eye on your email following the call. And I know one of the final slides in the presentation has a QR code that might link to something in terms of testing or trialing. And let me look at a few more of these. So we do this fun debugging part. Let's see. Is the additional webinar for Figma to plug in? Oh, I don't know if it's available for sign up yet. That's another one that should be promoted through the email following this webinar. So keep an eye peeled on that. And there is the webinar section of the website if you want to catch more of these where the Figma plugin workflows. Yeah, stay tuned on that one. All right, everyone cross your fingers. I've got the Jurassic Park name fully in mind right now. Let's see if I can even remember that password well enough. That's fine. 555. Let's keep doing that. Let's do that. That's fine. Oh, goodness. This little integer is really giving us problems. Any numbers? And this is where Alexa starts to really start to lose my Midwestern politeness and tell the AI that I really need you to allow me to enter numbers into the currency fields. And if nothing else, we'll go back to the homepage next and we'll explore some other things here, but let's let it get a chance to play with this. Thank you for the crossed fingers. Caleb, Bruno, you two are my favorite attendees right now. Well, that's interesting. Tom, good question. Now that you can switch models, do you find yourself switching throughout the create process? I have actually tried. I tend to stay on Sonnet still. It might be just comfort through familiarity, to be honest with you. I haven't played with GPT-5 as much as I should, but I do know depending on the prompt, I want to say I've heard from certain folks that like if you're putting in highly structured, like well-defined information, GPT-5 can be very, very successful with that. So I would say it's something I need to experiment with further. And for anyone who hasn't noticed that you can do this, you'll see that when I click on that model selector, you can pick which one they are on and that there are even additional models. So if we have anyone who really keeps an eye on AI models or LLMs and would like to try out the different models, let's say feel free to do so and provide feedback too. I mean, I'll call out that there is this little feedback tab in the lower left-hand side. Our product team is always looking at this for feedback from users. So super valuable, does not just go into a waste bin somewhere, like really valuable in terms of seeing what people are using and what they're enjoying. Good question. Yeah, and Andrew, that's a good question too. So I haven't used linear yet. I want to move into that next. I'd really like to get this integer field working, which, nothing. I haven't had the trouble with this integer field until I go onto a live webinar. But if I can get this working, or even if I can't, we'll just move into the linear portion next. But really, what I like to do with linear is pull in additional context outside of Builder. And so I have an MCP server that I'll just show you is integrated right here. I've got linear connected, and that's why I'm actually just going to be able to reference a ticket that I have there. I could ask it to read out what tickets are available, tell it to fix those for me. I'd like to do that variation on the landing page as the linear ticket that I have built to resolve. And so we'll probably just give that one a check next. But MCP servers are awesome because theoretically you can connect to a remote MCP server for any service, right? Any third party service, and not have to know how to actually structure the API call yourself. You can say, hey, use this HubSpot data to do XYZ, or connect to Jira and resolve this ticket for me. It's similar to linear, like resolve this ticket for me is kind of the prompt I'm planning to show you all through this. It's a tricky, tricky little bug. Okay. If worst comes to worst, yeah, let's see if I don't have this working, we could just switch out this one and I can let me just even I'll let this one finish and then we'll give the linear move a try just to keep things moving in that way. And I will say for any of our devs in the audience, if you're ever like, man, it would just be nice if I could work in conjunction with Fusion, kind of try to debug myself. There are the different modes available, right? So you can go into the code mode and see, hey, maybe I should be looking at where this is happening versus staying in the interact mode, which I'm primarily trying to do just to keep everything prompt based. Thank you, Corey. This test is for real, not just marking hype. And yes, I did try to quickly pull together a PRD and have something fun we could do with it. And with AI, everything's non-deterministic, right? So you can never have the same test twice, which is why it's so interesting sometimes to see what comes up your prototyping, right? And so the more you build, the less non-determinism you'll see, right? It's going to get more deterministic as we get more context, as we get more of the prototype that we're happy with that we've built. But those initial steps can always be a little troublesome as you're trying to do that. And it's fun too. I'm looking through the thinking right now. So we're adding a test component to check. Okay, so this is Fusion's testing right here on how is the input supposed to be entered and what are we actually doing here. Right. I'm just reading through the thinking. So we're looking to see if the test component's working. Oh, and it just has persistent values being set for some funny reason. All right. Forms are hard, my friends. Let me take a look. I'm sorry, I've neglected our Q&A a little bit, so let me keep an eye on the Q&A. New HubSpot. So, Bruno, good question. I believe HubSpot is not available as one of the MCP servers today without using Zapier. But I'll say A, if anyone uses HubSpot or works at HubSpot in the audience, we're always looking for new partners in terms of the MCP server marketplace. So use Zapier today, always open to new integrations in the future. And then keep an eye peeled because those do get added quite frequently. And Nando, yes, absolutely. You can import, export from to GitHub. All these repos, we can create a pull request so that, we can merge in whatever changes we're making here. So theoretically, after this, I could merge in all this testing, all this changes I've made for the prototyping. And because this was a greenfield, like a net new repository, I can create that repo with all the code we have for the app. If I connected to something that already existed, that would be when I could choose to do the pull request method to just create and merge whatever I was doing within Fusion. Now I'll go high level. Go high level, pretty please. Good call. All right. The summary. I'm gonna let the summary wrap up, and then I promised y'all we'll do linear, we'll do some other fun stuff. I'm gonna say keep going. I probably shouldn't have, I probably should. You know what? You're right. Let's stop this and let's go back to our getting started page and let's actually do some of that linear stuff. So I'm just gonna go to the router. We're gonna back up here. And let's just say that linear ticket bit, which was, aha, I found you. I don't care what the maximum depth is. Let's resolve linear tickets, and I think I want BU 2316, which is going to make that optimized version of, if I can pull this up one more time, that landing page. So right now it had a weird gradient, maybe not the prettiest, didn't have all the sections we necessarily wanted. So let's just say that we're going to create a landing page variation that's optimized for, user friendliness, for accessibility. And the one other thing I told Fusion to do, and theoretically I could be telling anyone to do this here, right? Like this is my internal linear ticket on a PM board to resolve this. But I'm saying do a web search, find out other common mortgage providers and how they're doing their landing pages. So I want you to incorporate that into whatever you're doing. The one thing I like to show here is that sometimes it's fun to see the way that, these LLMs do their web research. So it's Googling mortgage application, landing page design, best practices, user experience, accessibility. And we'll see that it's pulling up Rocket Mortgage, Quicken Loans, a few different providers that I didn't necessarily call out by name, but that it should just be able to find on its own. And all of this is just coming from resolving that linear ticket because I gave it the name. I could have asked it to list those originally, as I was mentioning beforehand, but I knew which one I wanted to solve, so we just had to do that. And now I don't need to make an API call or pull in that info in the ways that traditionally working with third parties I might have, right? Would make the forms easier. That's a good one. Oh, yeah, you can create your own branch for a feature. Yeah, so that's a good question. And actually, this is actually a really common question I'll sometimes get is, do we do branching and fusion? Can I connect to an existing branch? This right now isn't connect to an actual application, right? Like I've been saying, prototype. So there's nothing that this repo is connected to. We're building our own in Fusion that we can then create afterwards in GitHub and GitLab, wherever our teams work. But if you have an existing application and you need to build a feature, you can create a new branch using Fusion, and that's typically what we see. Or if your team has a workflow where you're all working off of like dev or QA, you can actually set that as your primary branch here and pull from that branch instead, if that's where you're working off of for your feature. And that's all in the project config settings for anyone who wants to give that a try. Oh, Nando, that's a really good question. I might show you something on this, kind of an audit type question. So if you have a mono repo, is there a way to train to code in a certain style or track down the components that are used? You are not the only one who has said like, hey, our design system can be quite dense, right? Or get quite messy, or maybe uses different versions. So you can ask Fusion, like, hey, what version of components are being used in my repo? Or you can even configure Fusion so it's only looking at certain directories via the builder rules. That's a really common spot for doing so. Or you can say ignore this subdirectory. Maybe you don't want that kind of code or that component to be what this tool is using in order to generate new code, because maybe it's not the nicest style of code that you have throughout the mono repo. So you can definitely configure what looks like best practice for your organization and what looks like an anti-pattern that you wouldn't like Fusion to follow. I've seen some folks do that to say like, okay, all code generated in the future should incorporate unit testing. We should be, maintaining accessibility best practices with the way that we do certain attributes, even certain color contrasts. And that's how you can set some of that up, even if the rest of the code base doesn't look that way yet. Awesome. And now the fun thing you'll see here is there is that kind of feedback loop where if I was working with the team, maybe closing out a Jira ticket, making a bug fix, saying, hey, I built this feature into the prototype that we're working on, I should see that I get a comment now on this landing page one where it says, hey, just now the variation was complete. Fusion's giving me the summary of all the things that it did for that landing page variation and the route where I can find that. So I'm going to head to the landing V2 and let's check out how that looked. And let me just pop that in. Landing V2. Just going to ignore whatever that's telling me. And let's hope this loads for me. Okay, cool. So here's our landing V2. If anyone can call out their mortgage provider, it was definitely used as the inspiration for this. Oh, look at that. And that input field works perfectly. That's just the way life goes. Okay. Your credit is excellent. Fantastic. I'll put in my actual zip code, Asbury Park. Yeah, and then you'll see that this one, oh, nice. Even came with kind of dummy data on all these. So if I was using Fusion right now to actually do my prototype, I'd probably say replace the original landing page with the optimized variant. And this is something that I think using LLMs can be super fascinating for, is like saying, hey, give me 2 to 3 variations of this component, and I'll tell you which one I like the most. Or, hey, give me 2 to 3 variations of this flow, of this page. And just seeing, if you tell the LLMs, like, I'm trying to optimize for user conversion or accessibility or just different things like that, right? What would it think when you get outside of your own head? And what the variations do you like? And maybe what would you get rid of? Like, I'd probably I don't know why this gradient was started, that would be something that I get rid of, but something that could be helpful here. Now, one other thing we can do that I haven't really shown is that, you can use external websites for, context for things. Oh, perfect. And now it took me to, let's see, I think it's removing this optimized version. So we just get that on our actual landing page. And hopefully we'll see our optimized version at the root. And there it is. Cool. One thing that we could do here that I sometimes like to do is go to like a different website, right? And pull in something that I see that looks cool. So this was Rocket Mortgage's site, obviously a popular mortgage provider. And I can just take a quick screenshot. If you give me a second, let me take this of this component and I can bring that into Fusion, right? And so if I want to go back here and say, hey, let's actually, let me drop this in. I want to add a customer testimonial block. What else do I want to say? Add sample data for the testimonials. It's just another way that you can kind of add in that additional, like, I like this, but like, let's keep refining, right? Like, let's keep iterating based on what we're seeing. So for this one, I didn't tell Fusion exactly where to put it. We'll see. We can move it around, right? We can change any of the colors and the things we don't like there, but I just want to see how far we can get. Oh, nice. Does it already know that was Rocket Mortgage? Did it say that on there? I'm just going to flip back really quickly. Oh, I probably had that in a screenshot. Sometimes funny how far you can get just looking at this kind of stuff. Let me let that one run for a second. Let me make sure I'm not neglecting any, yeah, chats, comments. Yeah, and the variations, this is something that's coming up a lot for people, I think, where even from that PRD flow, I would not have subjected you to this, even though I subjected you to a lot of debugging on this call. But dropping in that PRD and telling Fusion, like, make 2 variations of this flow, optimize them towards different things, or A/B test. I probably wouldn't say the A/B test, but like create 2 or 3 variants of, XYZ. It turns out really fascinating results. On our chat, let's see what we've got there. Sorry, any requisition API 101. Oh, Darius, that's a really good question. API 101 integration videos. Oh, wow, that's a big component. So for API 101, I like going to YouTube and all the time I will look for like, explain APIs to me. Like not like I'm a toddler, right? But like API 101 videos are really, really common on even just YouTube. I can take a look and probably put it in the follow-up if anyone wants to learn a little bit more about how APIs work. I think the coolest thing about MCP servers and my rudimentary but expanding knowledge is just the way that they make it easier for people who maybe traditionally would not have understood how an API works to connect to third-party data can use the MCP servers to do so, right? And like really expand the context and the data you can pull in without having to be super technical. So I'll definitely try to include a link for API 101 because I think that's a really valuable call out. And check out the MCP servers bit. I think MCP servers 101 is actually a really important thing for people, especially in this group, to understand for the future. And Connor, that's a really good question too. Confusion be used to ensure resulting prototype is not producing accessibility. I would do an audit, honestly, like tell Fusion to audit. And so I'm going to actually show you what this looks like. Let's do a quick audit after this one wraps up. Um, do a quick audit of the landing page, confirm my design tokens and design system components, the only ones in use, flag any accessibility issues. This will probably be one of the last prompts we do, and then I'll share with you all the link to the prototype. Probably going to try to debug that input field as we wrap up here. But yeah, you can do an audit on what Fusion is generating for you. And I think there's really cool ways that you can audit. So if you connect to an existing application, you can say, hey, I want to make sure that my design system components are like, let's say V19 and above, whatever your design system versioning is, right? And Fusion can look through all the pages, all the routes and tell you like, hey, this is where I see V19, this is where I see V17. You have some detached or custom components on these pages. Same for design tokens, same for accessibility issues. Like I actually think that some of the auditing capabilities that are a little bit newer that we're exploring right now are really interesting, where you're not necessarily changing anything, you just want that information so that you could potentially create a pull request to update all those, right? Or make sure everything's in compliance. Um, Definitely a really, really interesting thing we can do now. And I'm just saying landing page to try to scope down kind of the amount of things we're looking through. Realistically, for my four-step flow, this would probably be pretty quick. Depending on how large your application, your platform is, if you're connecting that, might take a little bit longer, right? I'll just expand this so you can see what's thinking like, okay, let's confirm what's being used here and then flag these other things. And so I'll let that one run. Great question. And if you can find APIs with a JSON that you can copy and paste into the Fusion chat is huge. Oh, Corey, have you tried that so far? I would love to know if anyone's tried that. I agree. Like you can pop in stuff like that and tell Fusion to run it for you, actually. Oh, and Tom, good question. So I'm not using Vercel or Netlify right now. I would recommend like the Netlify MCP server is pretty easy to set up. I have used that before. Um, yeah, I know you said that as well. MCP Netlify works extremely well. I haven't noticed a difference when I set it up beforehand and afterwards. It's really just a matter of going through that little OAuth pop-up. Um, yeah, so good question. Shouldn't be a difference on that one, but you can do either, and that is pretty nifty. And let me actually show everyone else who's not aware of what Tom's talking about. If I click share on this, you'll see how I can connect to Netlify, and then all I have to tell Fusion in the prompt is host this app with Netlify, and it'll deploy it for me. So then we can actually share that production link with folks. Right now, I do have a Fusion created peer review URL. So I can share this with, everyone in this chat. You can take a look at my prompts. And this is just going to be a build or hosted one right now, right? So it's not going to be continuously spun up and spun down. Um, but could be useful if you're just doing more internal sharing, like, hey, test out my prototype with your immediate groups. Now, in this one, I do want to show this audit that we quickly did for someone's comments. And we can see, okay, here's our design token usage. We're mostly compliant. A couple of issues here. And actually, I can go down. I can say, yeah, that component, they fixed the design token being what's the right way to say this? Make the right component. Match my purple design theme. Fix that one right off the bat. But then on the other bits, you can see where it's saying, okay, you're using all your design system components. There's a couple of accessibility issues found that I could tell it to fix, and then some minor issues, right? And so it gives me an immediate recommendation on what I should do just based on what I've prompted it. But obviously, if you all were using this to, do a more real audit of design system tokens, components, accessibility issues, you can get a lot more tailored recommendations that you could actually create the pull request for, right? And send it to the engineering team or engineers on the call. You can have kind of this double check just to make sure that nothing introduced in any of the applications, even legacy apps, has any potential issues there. Let's go down, let's check that section. It's big, but it's purple, right? It's the Barney the dinosaur of client testimonials. So I got what I asked for, even though I'd probably make it smaller in the future. I do want to wrap this up in a second because I know, yeah, uh, we're running out of time here, but let me take another quick look at our Q&A. Thanks everyone for, kind of sticking with me through some of those really fun integer debugging issues that, I probably will resolve right after this call because it is something that I like to have Fusion fix for me. But appreciate your questions, appreciate your comments. Really fun to kind of go on the prototype journey with you and excited to see what folks build, right? So with this in mind, I hope it's helpful in terms of adding context and even working with prompts. I will actually just go ahead and do one thing. Let me flip back to our appropriately memed presentation here. And I want to go into right this QR code for anyone who is asking about marketing and if there's anything available if you sign up following these webinars. I'd start here and then keep an eye on your email for the follow-up webinar to come with all those resources, with the future webinars, any of those additional materials that folks were asking for. But once again, I'll stop rambling. Thank you for all the chat comments and everything here. Appreciate it.